Hello and welcome. You're watching Battle of Champions, our special on the T20 World Cup. I'm your host Nikhil Naz and I'll be joined by former India captain in Sunil Gavaskar on the show. But before I get Sunny Bhai's comments, let's quickly take a look at what the scenario now holds for the Indian team. Now, the Indian campaign at the T20 World Cup may have started with a stutter, but with 2 wins out of 2, the men in blue have finally struck form. The question now is it too little too late? The math suggests not quite. India can still sneak into the semi-finals, but for that, they would need Afghanistan to do them a huge favour by beating New Zealand. Here's a closer look at all the permutations and combinations from Group 2.
Oh, that's a way to win a cricket match. Surya Kumar Yadav.
India have done all that they could do to keep their dream alive.
Smashes in a leg stump.
They needed to dismiss Scotland early and they wrapped them up for just 85 runs.
85. There's that man Bumrah. There was no support over there, so it was really a free hit. The ball will...
Then they needed to chase that target down in less than 43 deliveries and they did it in just 39 balls.
One of the finest players in the modern game.
With Pakistan already through to the semi-finals, only one out of India, Afghanistan and New Zealand can make it to the next stage.
Will again clear the field and there's only open spaces in this...
India's dominating performance against Scotland has taken them to the 3rd spot on the points table with a net run rate of 1.619, which is better than both Afghanistan and New Zealand. India and Afghanistan have same number of points, that is 4 from 4 games each, while New Zealand have a victory more than both India and Afghanistan. For India now, the match between Afghanistan and New Zealand on Sunday becomes as important as their last 2 matches have been.
Abu Dhabi, they win by 66 runs.
A victory for Afghanistan would mean that India would know exactly what they will need to do the following day when they take on Namibia.
Last ball.
However, if New Zealand are to win against Afghanistan, it will be game over for India, making their last game redundant as Kiwis will go through to the semi-finals as the second team from Group 2.
So important because this is...
Come Sunday, expect a massive support for Afghanistan as besides their own fans, 1.3 billion people will pray and cheer for their victory. Sports Bureau, India Today.
All right. Meanwhile, Ravindra Jadeja, after that win against Scotland, was asked by a scribe, what is India going to do if Afghanistan doesn't manage to beat New Zealand? And here's the all-rounder talking, keeping his wits about himself.
नहीं, अभी जैसे बोला जा रहा है कि अफगानिस्तान ने अगर न्यूजीलैंड को हरा दिया तभी हमारा चांस है क्वालिफाई करने का सेमीफाइनल में, बट अगर अफगानिस्तान नहीं हरा पाता न्यूजीलैंड को
तो फिर बैग पैक करके घर जाएंगे और क्या.
All right, just trust Ravindra Jadeja to talk as straight as he bats as well. You know, someone asked him, what are you going to do if Afghanistan doesn't do a favour to the Indian team? He said, what else can you do? You can only do things that are under your control. Let's quickly show you the points table as well and why that game between Afghanistan and New Zealand becomes very, very important for the Indian team. Because as you take a look at that last column, have a look at that. The run rate, India at a positive of 1.619, and that is what makes them favourite then, in the sense if there is a 3-way tie, to make it to the semi-finals. But for that you'll have to look at the points. Now India with 4 points, assuming that they go on to beat Namibia in their last encounter, will also give them 6 points. If Afghanistan, and that's what the Indian fans would be hoping for, if Afghanistan were to beat New Zealand, then 3 teams tied on 6 points. So it's going to be a very, very interesting scenario. Sunny Gavaskar is with us. Sunil, would it be fair to say that this Afghanistan versus New Zealand game would probably be the most watched T20 match of this particular World Cup, maybe to rival even India and Pakistan in terms of viewership?
I won't be surprised at all because, look, everybody knows that how crucial this match is for India's qualification. And not only will it be watched by millions, perhaps even a greater number than the India-Pakistan game, for the simple reason everybody in the subcontinent will be watching. People in Afghanistan will be watching as well. And they all know that on the result of this game depends the chances of India qualifying for the semi-finals. So I won't be surprised if this is the most watched game in the IPL, maybe apart from the India-Pakistan game and the finals later.
Okay, Saima, let's get into the details. Looking at that Afghanistan team, if Indian fans are hoping for Afghanistan to get the better of New Zealand, they'd want their spinners firing. And I'm going to talk about Mujib. We saw him not play because of injury, 2 games that he hasn't played. And once he doesn't play, the plans as far as the bowling plans of Afghanistan are concerned, it tends to upset those plans. How important is going to be Mujib's fitness and him making it into the playing 11 if Afghanistan were to beat New Zealand?
That's absolutely right. I think Mujib is an important cog in their spinning wheel. And with Rashid and Mujib, when they bowl their 8 overs, you hardly get any freebies. You hardly get any deliveries which you can smack around. And New Zealand have shown that although they have got a couple of good spinners, they don't play this quality of spin all that well. So clearly, I think these 8 overs are going to be very crucial.
From Afghanistan's perspective, we saw them, they won that toss against India and then decided to chase a total. You can't blame them because that's what conventional logic is dictating at the moment in all the games that are being played in the UAE, that it's better to chase. But just looking at this Afghanistan team and its makeup, would you say this is one of those teams for it just augurs well if they bat first, because batting being their weaker suit, if they notch up something like 140, you'd, put your money on them defending it.
And also, I think the due factor, you've got to take into account the due factor. Listen, if a team scores 180 plus, then the due factor is, minimized to a great extent because you've given your bowlers, the 20, 30 runs cushion where they will not be able to grip the ball well and they might bowl some loose deliveries, some boundary and 6 deliveries. So, yes, I think if you score about 180 or thereabouts, like India found against Afghanistan, 210 they got, and then although they were their spinners were taken for a few, it was the cushion that allowed them to bowl freely. So yes, maybe if they bat first, they also, and listen, in what is a virtual sort of quarter-final, runs on the board always puts pressure on the team that is chasing it. It could be a small total, but the pressure is always there.
That was going to be my next question, Sanibai. We often talk about the better team is going to win, but you'd have to say that the pressure would be a little more on New Zealand. And when that pressure is there, we've seen even the best of the teams sometimes crumble.
Absolutely. And how they cope with the pressure is going to be the key. In recent times, what New Zealand have shown is that they cope with pressure well. We saw that even in the World Cup finals, they had a bit of bad luck, but otherwise, they coped brilliantly with the pressure. In the World Test Championship as well, they kept their cool. So clearly, I think Kane Williams' leadership is going to be the key. And if he can hold the innings together, then yes, New Zealand will give themselves a fair chance. All that they have to do is win by 1 run, or win by 1 wicket. That's all that they need to do. New Zealand know that they just need to win this game to qualify for the semis.
Saime, pardon me if you see a bit of a slant in my questions, all favoring the Indian team, because as an Indian fan, I tend to look at all sorts of positives for the Indian team. How is it that they can qualify? One thing that I can notice at the moment is, there are 2 premier batsmen, or the batsmen that you really hope are going to get them a lot of run. One is Kane Williamson. You just spoke about him averaging in his 20s in this T20 World Cup. Not quite the kind of lofty standards that he sets for himself. The other, Conway, came into this tournament with a lot of form, still not getting them too many runs. So these are those areas that a team like Afghanistan can really exploit.
They should be able to get these batsmen out very early. Also, Martin Guptill at the top of the order can be quite dangerous. Mitchell has batted well. So New Zealand have shown enterprise at the top and a little bit of solidity once the 6 overs of power play is done. A little bit of solidity in the middle. So once again, I think like we've seen in all the matches, the power play is pretty much the decider. Whether you're bowling or whether you're batting, how many runs you score in the power play, how many wickets you take in the power play, often pretty much decides the course of the match.
Okay, as Sunil says there, and we saw that during the IPL as well. You know, power play becomes very, very important, and you know that once Afghanistan come out to bat, their batsmen bat in that one sort of fashion, that fifth gear that they're going to try and exploit as far as the power play is concerned. But I'm going to talk about that Afghanistan bowling. Yes, if Mujib is fit, he does bowl in the power play. Nabi also bowls in the power play. Many thought that he missed a trick when he didn't bowl himself enough versus India. Should he then be looking to bowl a little bit more in the power play, put the Kiwi batsman in pressure, Nabi with the ball? Sunil, can you hear me? Right, I think we seem to have lost the connection with Mr. Gavaskar, who's joining us live. One more time, I'm going to give it a shot. Sunil, can you hear me now? Okay, we seem to have lost connection with him. We'll try and patch him back as soon as we can and then try and get his thoughts on that encounter. But for the moment, let's look back at that India versus Scotland game. Now, that game lasted only about 24 overs because that's how dominant the Indian team was. But the Indian team, after the game, spent more than 24 minutes with the Scottish team in their dressing room, sharing tips. You have the likes of Virat Kohli, Jasprit Bumrah, Ravichandran Ashwin, Rohit Sharma, all going up to the Scottish players and sharing a few tips of how to play at the highest level.
I did. I think that's one of the you play the best. I used to play a lot of tennis ball cricket when I was young, so that's where it began. If you look at the tennis ball, it just squeezes nicely. So that's where you started. So you basically, when you put the finger on the tennis ball, it squeeze into it. So with the tennis ball, I actually go the one that goes back in its way. So the cricket ball is a little hard because it doesn't go.
He told me as well, Mike, that I'm glad he bowled, otherwise I would have not played India. So I started very fun India as well. I started fast bowling because I was trying to help my state team. The fast bowler was done and the other batsmen were batting. So I was like, you know what, I'm fit, I just roll over my arm and all.
Right, fascinating to hear a few of those Indian cricketers share their tips with the Scottish team, the team that they had beaten convincingly. You heard Ravichandran Ashwin talking about how he started playing with a tennis ball, and that's how he started spinning the ball and then gradually matured into playing with the leather ball. And then you heard MS Dhoni share a few tips about leadership. You heard from Hardik Pandya of how he started bowling. He used to bowl regularly during some of those, club games, and then from there on started working on his bowling, but started off as a batsman. So some very fine tips which is going to help these associate teams. Many times there are questions asked as to why you have to have these associate teams participating in a tournament like this, because it's a platform such as this. When you get to interact with some of the top players, that's when you get to know some of those very crucial tips that may help you when you compete against better teams like India, Pakistan and such teams that they've played in this particular T20 World Cup. Okay, moving on now. This might just be the end of the road for two West Indian legends as far as international cricket is concerned. I'm talking about Chris Gayles and DJ Bravo. DJ Bravo has already announced his retirement from international cricket, and this game that at the moment West Indies is playing against Australia is his swan song. As far as Chris Gayles is concerned, he hasn't officially announced his retirement, but we saw from the reactions when the players were walking off after Chris Gayles got out, the kind of reception that he got from the West Indian players, everyone hugging him. It gave an indication that this might have been the last time that we're seeing Chris Gayles play in West Indian colours. He may still continue to play franchise cricket across the globe, that is if there is a demand for him. But for West Indies, you thought also, just going on with the fact that West Indies hasn't really performed well in this tournament, you knew that this time had come where you had to look at the future and look at cricketers that could contribute moving forward. Sunny Gavaskar has joined us back on the program. Sunny, we were talking about DJ Bravo, Chris Gayles. DJ Bravo has already said this would be his last game. Chris Gayles, the kind of reception he got, we're assuming he may have played the last international game for the West Indies. Just going back and looking at their contribution, two-time World Cup winners in this format, what great servants of the game these two have been.
Terrific, absolutely terrific as far as game of cricket is concerned, not just West Indies cricket. The way they have played, the way they have given enjoyment to millions of spectators all over the world on television as well as at the ground. And they're joy de vivre. They enjoy their cricket, and that's why the West Indies are such a popular team, because they've always got a smile on their face. Even if somebody is hitting them for a six, there is no snarling, there is no swearing. They just shrug their shoulders and walk back to their mark. And that is the reason why Warne, the cricketing world is sad when the West Indies are not doing well. Everybody in the cricketing world wants the West Indies to do well, because they bring a completely different flair, a completely different style to the game. And these two, Chris Gayles and Dwayne Bravo, epitomize what is West Indies cricket.
As we've been saying here, Sanjay, that DJ Bravo's already announced the retirement. Chris Gayles hasn't, but we've seen that the last few years, that golden touch that Chris Gayles had has eluded him. You think it was anyway time, even if he was to make himself available, he'll find it very tough to be picked by the West Indian team. And also the kind of crossroad where the West Indian team is at the moment, they'd have to look at the future, breed a few new talented youngsters into the team if they want to have a good roadmap for the future.
Yes, I think if he had done well, even in the IPL, then there would have been, maybe some thoughts about keeping him for the next T20 World Cup, which is just a year away. There is always a possibility that you try to rebuild after that World Cup, because then the next World Cup, T20 World Cup, will be maybe a couple of years away. So clearly, the fact that he hasn't done well in this tournament, and the fact that he was left out of the Punjab team in the IPL, does signify that maybe it is the end of the road as far as universe boss is concerned. He may continue to play franchise cricket, but I don't think he will be considered for West Indies cricket.
All right, Saima, I wanted to pick your brains about something that we were talking on the program a little earlier when we lost the connection with you. We showed visuals of the Indian players after that game against Scotland, which they won. They went into the Scottish dressing room, spent a lot of time there, were sharing tips with a lot of Scottish players. I'll read out a couple of reactions that we got from the Scottish camp. They put a tweet out saying, this moment has been priceless for us. The other tweet that Cricket Scotland put out said that huge respect for Virat and his boys to come out here and speak to our players. Just goes on to tell you what it really means for these lower ranked team to spend some time, get those tips from players who have been performing at the highest level for a long time. Saibhai, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have some sort of trouble now on the line with Sunny Gavaskar. We were listening to him talk about Chris Gayles and DJ Bravo and what great servants of the game they've been as far as cricket is concerned. Sunny, are you back? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Could you hear my question, or would you like me to repeat it?
Yeah, I mean, it's what you were trying to say before I lost you.
Yeah.
And it's always good when those who have played at a higher level exchange notes with those who are aspiring to get to the higher level. That's what you see with junior cricketers, trying to listen into what the senior cricketers are saying, to be able to learn from them. And I think that is exactly what Scotland players would have felt when they met up with some of the Indian players who have played so much more cricket than they have. Also to be able to exchange experiences with them, how to get better, simple things like training methods, simple things like how to practice better. These are things that can help change the game for associate countries. We saw that earlier on also with some other teams. So it was very good to see that happening, because that is what sport is all about. You play hard on the field, but off the field, you should be friends. And that was so good to see that happening after that game.
All right. It also reinforces that belief, Sanibhai, that you should have these associate nations, because there is a lot of criticism that I saw that came their way, that why should you have a few easy games in the tournament. Also reinforces that belief that such teams also make the tournament very, very interesting. And it's platforms like this which will actually help them develop cricket and then participate as stronger teams going into the future.
Well, they've qualified. Don't forget, they've not just been given an free entry. They've had to qualify the qualifying tournament and to get to this particular participation in this T20 World Cup. So it's not that they've just been given an entry, and which means that they've played good cricket. Remember, even Bangladesh and Sri Lanka had to qualify, so it wasn't as if it was it was just given to them on a platter. Ireland, for example, being a full member country, hasn't quite come on the way, say, Afghanistan have in all formats of the game. So yes, I think more participation that you have, the more experience that they get, they can only get better. And I'm pretty much in line with the fact that for this particular tournament to have had these teams was pretty good.
All right, Sanibhai, before we let you go, one final word, and I'm again going to bring up that Afghanistan versus New Zealand game because that is what Indian fans would love to hear. Can Afghanistan do it? Can they beat New Zealand? What do you reckon?
They definitely can, because look, New Zealand will be under pressure. No doubt about that. Look, if I would like Mujib to be fit. If Mujib is fit, then it certainly gives Afghanistan a huge advantage. And considering that the match is going to be played in the afternoon, that might be something that might also work for Afghanistan, because not a lot of New Zealand players are used to playing in the kind of heat that is there in the UAE at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So all things considered, maybe Afghanistan should bat first for those 20 overs, tire out the New Zealand fielders so that they might not be able to take those 2s and 3s if they're chasing. So all these little factors have to be considered. So yes, I do believe Afghanistan have the capability of beating New Zealand.
All right, Sanibhai. On that positive note, we'll wrap up the show. Thanks so much for joining us. And as Sanibhai was pointing out, it's not all emotions that are talking. There is cricketing merit in the argument that Afghanistan can definitely beat New Zealand on a given day. That's all that we have on the show.